a lottery that was easy to win, but no one wanted to win it. It created fear in many young men, and they did anything to avoid it. The draft, known to be one of the scariest prizes to man in the 1960s, and many people, like John Lee, witnessed people who did anything to avoid it. The Vietnam War started in the 1940s when the Vietnamese finally rose against France and became an independent country. Then in 1954, Vietnam split into two separate states, North Vietnam and South Vietnam. The two states of Vietnam went to war. It wasn't until 1965 that America joined the war. During the war, there was a method used to obtain troops. This method was called the draft lottery. The first lottery was held on December 1st, 1969. This event determined the order of call for induction during calendar year 1970, that is, for registrants born between January 1st, 1944 and December 31st, 1950. There were 366 blue plastic capsules containing birth dates placed in a large glass container and drawn by hand to assign order of call numbers to all men within the 18 to 26 age range specified in Selective Service Law. With radio, film, and TV coverage, the capsules were drawn from the container, opened, and the dates inside posted in order. The first capsule contained the date September 14th. So all men born on September 14th in any year between 1944 and 1950 were assigned lottery number 1. The drawing continued until all the days of the year had been paired with sequence numbers. More than 1.8 million men were drafted into the Vietnam War using the sequence of the lottery number. There were lots of protesters who were first against the war and then the draft. The first protest was in April 1963, before the war happened, when Bertrand Russell wrote a letter that accused the U.S. government of conducting a war of annihilation in Vietnam. It wasn't until 1964 that protests got big. One of the biggest protests was in May 1964, when up to 1,000 students walked from Times Square to the United Nations headquarters protesting against the intervention in Vietnam. A number of organizations led student anti-war protests. One of the main groups was Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. SDS sent representatives to witness the destruction caused by the United States in Vietnam, paid for students to get to the marches, and at protest days sometimes waved Pay-A-VN flags. Surprisingly, soldiers would also protest the war. Some would refuse to carry out their duty in the war. Other soldiers burned or destroyed official military materials, just as students had burned their draft cards. Some threw away medals given to them by their government for bravery while fighting, and many people were shocked that their soldiers would do this. John Lee was a man who didn't serve in battle and wasn't even drafted, but he knew lots of people who avoided being drafted and did not want to serve in war. He was in ministerial school at Lincoln Christian College. He attended there from 1964 to 1973 with 800 other graduate and undergraduate students.
To avoid the draft, and others went to a place like I did, but I didn't go to avoid the draft. I wanted to be a minister, and so therefore I went to a Bible college. When I graduated from that college, out of a class of 200, there were 2 of us who were actually preaching.
There were many ways to avoid being drafted. Being a minister was one way. A person could be a conscientious objector. Others could make up a health condition or fail the physical exam, or have children who needed a parent, or be married, or claim to be a homosexual, or hold an essential civilian job. A person could also run away to Canada, which was illegal, like many draft dodgers did. The Vietnam War and the draft lottery was very controversial. It had a lot of protesters who hated them, and lots of people were scared of both of them. Some people did anything they could to avoid being drafted because it was a prize not to be won.